is Thrive Perspectives, an ever-growing discussion about the issues and ideas that shape our lives, with your guide, Dr. Matthew Jacoby.
Hi listeners, Stuart here from Thrive Today. You know, many people tune in to a Thrive podcast every week. We're really encouraged by the feedback we receive on how these podcasts are impacting people's lives in very real ways and equipping them as they grow in their faith. Now, our hope and desire is to continue to make these podcasts available for free. However, there is a very real cost to make this happen. This is where you can help us. If you'd like to contribute to assist us in meeting these ongoing production and distribution costs, then please join our listener support program with a monthly subscription. Now, you can do this very quickly and simply. Just go to thrivetoday.tv, that's our website, thrivetoday, one word, .tv. At the top of the homepage, you'll see a button that says Donate. This will give you the option to support the Thrive podcast with a donation of $5 or $10 or $50 per month. You can set your own support level. So we hope you'll consider supporting this ministry in this way. Again, to those who are monthly supporters, a huge thank you to you. Your contribution is helping us continue to provide these Thrive podcasts for free. So it's easy. Visit thrivetoday.tv, click on the donate button. We thank you for your support by tuning in, but also by contributing financially in this way. Now let's jump into this episode of Thrive with Matt. Good morning, Connell. Good morning, Matt.
Here we are.
Sitting at the new podcast tabletop, which we got especially for Connell because he'd been complaining they just didn't have enough room at the end of the table there, but we've now given them lots of room.
And I didn't even notice.
It's looking very fancy in here, folks, if you can imagine.
Well, that's interesting. You might not need to imagine soon as we get into the conversation.
We've got an interesting conversation today.
We sure have. So
it was hard, actually, to not start the conversation off mic. It was like, stop! Let's involve everyone in this conversation.
Sounds good. Well, welcome Thrive Perspectives as we continue our journey through a reflection on what a Christian worldview is and how that applies to the challenges and opportunities that we face in society today. And we're going to sort of continue on a little bit from our conversation last week where we were looking at technology and how technology impacts and has impacted and continues to impact our lives. Last week, we spoke a bit about the development of AI, and if you haven't had a chance to have a look into what AI is, if you haven't already, just do a Google search and you'll find out a bit about that. But the way that there's a significant level of convergence now between what's called artificial intelligence and other technologies, and it's really going to see an incredible acceleration in the change of the way we live over the next decade, and even potentially sooner than that. Today, we want to sort of talk a little bit about relationships and how technology is, and in the future is likely to significantly impact our relationships. What is a relationship? What makes us human in terms of our relationships with other people? Given that people are now developing somewhat intimate relationships, certainly from a conversational point of view, with AI chatbots. They're having conversations, they're sharing their concerns, and there's quite a bit of research starting to come out now where people are finding it safer in some ways to have a relationship with a machine, an artificial intelligence machine, than they are with people. And I think, this is kind of accelerating, but I think also we've already stepped into this over the last decade, probably with the, phones and technology that we're already using is impacting, I think, the way we engage with other people. So,
yeah, I mean, where do we start? Because, you can go back and there's this gradual sort of fragmentation of relationships. I mean, well, as Christians, we would go back to the fall, and from the start, you see a fragmentation of relationships. The first thing after the fall is Cain and Abel and their fragmentation. Cain goes off, builds a fortress. It says in our Bibles, builds a city. But that's fragmentation, because by a city meant an actual fortress,
walls,
walled city. So suddenly you've got, not suddenly, this is very sort of summary history, but you've got people living in walled cities and a very fragmented humanity. And that's kind of the trajectory the biblical narrative pictures initially human beings as completely connected. I mean, the famous biblical image is the man and the woman, two halves of a whole, right?
Yeah.
And that's in a sense a picture of this sense of, humanity as so knit together, almost like a sort of a one big beautiful neural network, all connected and sharing this wonderful experience, and in many ways embodying the image of God and being completely united with God and with each other. And it's, it's so difficult to imagine that. I don't think you can almost go too far in imagining the level of connection with God and each other that was had in that state. And it's difficult to imagine because there's just been this stages of disconnection. And, you look at that through history, and even, talking about technology, one of the big things about the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century was the way that it fragmented societies. People moved out of rural communities. They moved into urban centers. There was a sense of alienation from the sense of place that they had previously. They're all crowded into cities, sense of loss of identity. And then, they're working in factories and they're treated as sort of automata. And
just coming before you move past that, the whole urbanisation thing, it's interesting if you look at some research around fences. We used to live in properties, in houses that didn't have these fences.
Yeah.
Now we build these as high as we can fences around our property because this is our space. And
That's right.
We actually, how many people, I know a number of people, don't even know who their neighbours are.
Yeah, that's right.
Who live right next door to them.
Yeah. So it's already, it's like this built-in trajectory of fragmentation. We keep trying to, and one of the interesting other things that goes along through that. So this is just starting for a bit of a big picture, worldview picture. The interesting thing in Scripture is that you get this fragmentation, and then over against that, you get these human attempts, and we even see this in the Bible, these human attempts to force some kind of unity, or to create some what I describe as sort of artificial unity. So the classic thing about the Tower of Babel, and of course Babylon really stands for it's almost symbolic of that human propensity to empire, and I may say a very totalitarian empire, to gather everyone together, under fear and threats and all sorts of things. And then you see that just being broken one after, that these artificial attempts to artificially sort of unite people and break them again. It's very interesting, actually, against that backdrop, to note how incredibly countercultural for its time so many elements of the law of Moses were. The ideas of community in the laws of Moses, and the fact that they couldn't own their own land. It all belonged to God, and they had to share. And then all of these ideas of sharing. And so many of the laws were designed to facilitate a strong sense of community. And of course, you see this in the New Testament, in Acts chapter 2, the outcome of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit is shown to be they were all one in heart, this sense of oneness that they had. So you get these two things in the world system. You get this kind of fragmentation and these attempts to draw things into sort of an artificial unity.
Under our own terms, though. I would suggest that we'll come to that later, because the terms of that artificial eliminate some of the things that actually hold us accountable, I think.
Yeah.
But we'll come to that.
And they're always dehumanizing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Always dehumanizing. And so, I think as we map, the role of technology, and as I said, I mean, the Industrial Revolution was a technological, revolution, and this is what I think it's Klaus Schwab refers to the fourth industrial revolution as what we're experiencing now, which is a game changer in terms of how, again, it's another game changer in terms of how human beings relate to each other. And therefore, as people pointed out during the 19th century Industrial Revolution, it's a game changer for human identity. Human identity fundamentally changes alongside the technology that we use to manipulate the world. And as much as we use technology to manipulate our world, that technology manipulates us. And that's the thing that we can easily miss. And so I guess we've got to think discerningly as Christians and be aware of how is our technology shaping us. We're in I think, really interesting place right now, and you guys have done lots of great research on some of these things that are happening now. I don't know where you want to start here, Stu.
Well, Connor, have you got a bit of an opening remark that's less than half an hour? Or?
I haven't got as many words as that. It's built into us, isn't it? The need for community. We're hardwired.
Yeah,
it's almost
right.
That was God's plan right from the beginning.
Yeah.
was for. That's if you actually get down to the nuts and bolts of framing Christian worldview and what God designed us to be, is to be in connection and harmony and with Him and with each other. And maybe the greatest level of dysfunction is when we disconnect from each other and stop functioning as a cohesive community, within ourselves. And if you think about it too, that's what essentially that sin does. It creates dysfunction. And if we're hardwired by God to be seeking community in relationships and so on, if we're hardwired for that, the reason that it's almost like right from the starting blocks, we start pushing away, building walls, segregating, dehumanizing, devaluing, and so on. We start that whole process. Why is that? Well, ultimately, I guess it comes back to sin and the need, we get jealous, or we need to control people. We try to grab power. And in order for us to achieve our objectives, we've got to behave in certain ways that pushes against that. So that's the ultimate problem here. The problem isn't technology. No. We want to be careful there.
Yeah, totally.
Because it doesn't matter what technology that we're talking about. It's just they're a tool in our hands, and our hands are kind of evil in terms of how we
let's define. I mean, you mentioned the word sin a couple of times. The best definition, I think, for sin is independence and autonomy. Autonomy, really. That's actually how Christopher Watkins, in this book, Biblical Critical Theory, which we'll talk more about, and I think we've mentioned before, which is an excellent book, won the Christianity Today Book of the Year. He comes back to that defining sin as essentially it's autonomy. And now you think about autonomy and how the effect that has on human relationships, that yes, we all are wired to need relationships, but we want that on our own terms in a way that preserves our autonomy, which is enormously dysfunctional because it's actually completely antithetical to, the idea of relationships, which involved a real sense of sharing, of trust, and a level of togetherness that just is discordant with the idea of autonomy. It's interesting that these changes to talk about this technological progress happens so incrementally. You were making a comment off Mike Stewart just about the step from PCs to laptops.
Yeah, well, the fact that, when computers stayed at work, I mean, you wouldn't pack up the big box and take it home.
Yeah.
As soon as we got that portable, suddenly it's like, I'll just take half an hour to quickly finish this letter at the time, or whatever it might have been, now emails. And if you think about how much now time at home on devices of some kind interferes with our direct relationship, even with our immediate family. I think in the research, and I don't know where we want to jump in here, that I've done, particularly in relation to people trying to engage with AI and all those sorts of things, it's actually around, as you said, getting the relationship on our terms, which means you rule out how you learn humility. You rule out people being able to kind of say to you, hey, that's not a great attitude, Stu. That accountability thing.
Just explain what you're talking about there, Stu, because you're talking about a scenario where people are relating to AI, and some of our listeners may be a little incredulous about that. But I think this is a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. So I've read an academic paper. The organisation called Human Communication Research in Norway did a study on people because they recognised an increasing number of people were engaging in what they would call intimate relationships with AI chatbots. We're just talking about chatbots. And they wanted to find out from this group of people, how they defined what was it that was attracting them to that and not. And these people had long-term kind of, over 18 months relationships with this chatbot where they would every day or as often as they wanted engage in conversation, ask questions, all those sorts of things. And it talked about, first of all, how do we define what a relationship is, what friendship is, and then how do these chatbots actually meet that criteria? Where are the shortcomings currently anyway? And so, there's a growing number of people. There's a growing number of we hear about Chat GPT, but there's a number of different chatbots out there, many of them. And people are beginning to engage in relationships. And they tried to ask the people the reasons for that. And interesting, those reasons, talking about the ability to trust. I think there was an element where people said one of the things they did miss was the accountability, where someone was willing to push back, because the chatbot's only ever going to tell you really what you want to hear.
Yeah.
The shared experience, like the chatbots, until you engage with it, it's not knowing or doing anything. You can't say, oh, I remember that time we were out on the beach and we saw that, you can't have. So all of these things, they were identifying the shortcomings. But the interesting thing was, as we look at this and we look at technology and you look at the research, and I read another email, in fact, I forwarded it to you last night, Matt, around, the greatest issue that society globally really is dealing with right now is loneliness and isolation, social isolation and loneliness. So I guess the question I started to ask is, rather than, as you said, Connell, and these guys said, the technology is not evil, because there's a lot of positive stuff that technologies have been able to do for us. I can communicate with my relatives overseas instantly. I can send them photos instantly, so the ability of social media and all these sorts of things has certainly, there's positive uses for that. And if you look at healthcare and a whole lot of things, the whole virtual kind of way that we can engage with our doctors or whatever it might be. So it's not that the technology is bad, it's just how that technology is being used. And it got me asking the question, what have we lost where someone decides that a relationship with a machine is actually of better value than a relationship with another human being? Instead of pointing the fault at the machine or at the technology or at the advances in technology, maybe we need to ask ourselves the question, are we just too busy for relationships?
Well, there's a lot of the social researchers, if you go look at, which I had a look at in sort of reading for this, in preparation for this, and I was surprised really, this is going back, like over 5 to 10 years, with social researchers flagging up, we're starting to see a problem here. This has always been a problem, how we dehumanize people and disconnect from. This has been an increasing problem all through history, which is what we said before. But they're starting to say, look, this is picking up pace. Like, people are more lonely and untrusting than they've ever been. And there's a whole lot of different things driving that. But that feeds into what you're saying there, Stu, because I think people are looking to say a chatbot because they're already feeling that loneliness and that disconnection. And so, and I think even for ourselves, I mean, I have these conversations with people all the time when we look at, especially our young people, dealing with seemingly higher levels of anxiety and mental illness and struggling to cope in the world. There's a whole lot of different factors for that. But, with that going back to the good old days, but when I look back to when I was a kid, I don't think it was as bad as what it is today.
No, and I think that's fairly generally agreed. And I believe that, the technology is cited as a big player in that everything that I've read recognizes that there's a sense in which technology going, and of course the advent of social media has been a big player in this as well.
So the question though is, what about the technology? Because it's not just the technology. And my observation, even with my own kids growing up, a big part of it would be no one really knows what's the truth anymore, because what you see on social media is often the best possible view. And then you start to get all these conflicting, whereas when I grew up, what I saw on the news or what my parents told me, it was like, I just didn't have to question that. But now there's so many there's access to so many countering.
And that would be a pro as well as a con, that's seen
could
as,
be.
I would argue, having access to that information, being able to get all sides of opinions and access information from all sorts of different biases is a good thing. The issue there though is, like, social media controls what you see.
Correct.
It makes you think you're doing the research or you're getting a wide variety of opinion when actually it's being carefully orchestrated by technology along the lines of your already predetermined bias that it's figured out. So that it is manipulating us. I mean, anyone who's seen that documentary, the
Social Dilemma.
The Social Dilemma on Facebook is alarming as well, with the basic people who are part of, worked at Facebook are saying that we don't let our kids use Facebook. We know what's going on. We know the amount of this thing is not, it's not innocent. It is manipulating what people think. And that's alarming.
So can I just come back to that? Because I agree it is positive, but I think the negative here is that life experience is what actually informs us to discern. And they're getting this information, this massive amount of information, without any sense of life experience, with parents, and I'm pointing at myself as much as anyone else here, not accusing parents out there, but who are busy working to maintain a lifestyle, who don't have the time for the conversations, the important conversations about what matters and what doesn't matter, and they're having to discern this themselves, and I think it's just overwhelming them. It's just completely overwhelming them.
But the problem is the like, say, social media in itself, but then because it's a tool of convenience,
yes,
as parents, we can leave our kids sitting in front of social media or in front of their iPads and so on, because it's convenient
and we're busy
for us. So there's a whole multiple layers of problems that are essentially, I think what's happening is we are giving up on things for convenience. If you tie all of this back down to technology, it's making things very, very easy and convenient for us, so we can just sort of give up or let go or take the easy way out, and we could just sit in front of a screen and consume stuff and allow these things to. And it's not just basically raise our children, but it also makes it easy for us to be entertained.
And the interesting thing about all of this, at the moment, we've sort of got the doomsday flag up, but I do want to put another, of course, anticipate another flag here, because I think there's something massive here, I think, for Christians and for the Christian church. I think actually we carry something that is going to be seen as increasingly unique. And so I think there's a really important role for the Christian church to play in this. But, what we're seeing in sort of summary terms is human beings being able to do more. We can manipulate our reality, but we all know, this is the interesting thing about this, everyone knows that this is doing damage. I mean, all of the analysis and this, and listeners may be even getting a little bit tired about hearing all of this, constant sort of doomsday stuff around technology and AI. I mean, depends what you listen to, I guess, doesn't it? But it's interesting that there is that consciousness that this is doing something to us. Even a lot of secular thinkers are saying this is dehumanizing us in some way. Now, where they get their idea of humanity from, I don't know, but there still is that sense of dehumanizing, and yet they acknowledge we can't really stop it. Yeah. You can't stand in the way of progress. Mustafa Suleiman in his book, The Coming Wave, he said, it was a very recent book, basically says, here are all the problems, and realistically, you can't really put reins on, you can't really rein in progress. It's just going to happen. And so it is an interesting dilemma, because on the one hand, everyone sort of knows that this is a very problematic trajectory, and yet we can't stop it, even though it's human beings that are creating this.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is a very interesting scenario.
And even secular researchers are noticing it. I would say this is probably not even something. I would say it's mostly probably secular researchers that are noticing it.
Yeah.
As researching the condition of us, especially the social science in the social science area. Yeah. And so they're observing and becoming concerned, because this is not like a Christian problem. And I think even as Christians, we're probably falling behind in terms of our thinking. We're actually very passive on this, the secular world. Secular researchers are very actively thinking about this. They see not just, they see technology as a massive, massive problem, but they're also reading the research that, they start off their research papers and they're always talking about what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to dehumanize relationships? And we're talking about what is the value of being human? What do we recognize in that? It's what you recognize in other people. And the different criteria of you recognize that they have some sort of innate value, that they have complex minds and emotions and feelings and things like, so that you can see them grappling then with what does it really mean to be human. And of course, without a Christian worldview,
that speaks to Matt's point where he says we've got a unique thing here.
We do.
That's right. Yeah,
we do. Yeah, we have that absolutely.
That we need to be speaking about.
Because the other thing is that the techno optimists, and I've read a bit across this field about how how various thinkers are responding, to this. And there's a stream of sort of techno-optimism where they're saying, well, to be human is a fluid thing. There isn't a fixed sort of essence. So we will just have to adapt, and all of the problems are just the growing pains, right? So we're moving, they say, into the age of transhumanism, right? Where we can actually manipulate not only ourselves, but manipulate our reality. In Yuval Noah Harari's terms, this is us moving from Homo sapiens, no less. I mean, this is how revolutionary he thinks this is. We're moving from being Homo sapiens to being Homo Deus. And he uses that term because now we are becoming gods. We can manipulate ourselves and our environment to the extent that we have this level of sort of power over our own reality in some sense. Do we then there replies, well, do we really? And from a Christian point of view, believing, no, we do actually have a fixed essence, and there are just some things we are always going to need. And so we would say, no, there are some things that could actually fundamentally dehumanize us. In fact, from a Christian worldview perspective, we would argue that the dehumanizing process has been going on since Adam and Eve ate the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? Yeah. So there's been this successive dehumanizing process. There are a lot of philosophers who would, take that right back to the move from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic, the domesticating crops, as Jared Diamond says. Jared Diamond wrote a very famous book called Guns, Germs and Steel, and he's done a lot of kind of paleo sort of like almost pre-human prehistory work in prehistory, and he's a very influential thinker. And I mean, he says that pretty much when we domesticated crops, we actually domesticated ourselves in a way that, in as much as we did something kind of unnatural with our environment, we also did something very unnatural to ourselves. Yeah. And so hence by domesticating crops, we started doing work that wasn't really natural for us. I mean, and interestingly, this is something even Harari, and Yuval Noah Harari is a philosopher, academic, historian. And I mean, even, he admits in his book, Sapiens, that, he picks up this point. We did something that was really unnatural to ourselves. We started domesticating crops, domesticating animals. It's where a lot of diseases came from. It's where our nutrition suffered from that. We started to do work that was unnatural to us.
We built walls.
We started building walled cities because suddenly there was possession, and suddenly land, was owned, moving from the sort of hunter-gatherer society.
It made it easier for us too.
Yeah,
to get food and
it did. But they say, and here's where this keeps coming up. They say, but it was dehumanizing, right? Yeah. They're saying this about the Neolithic period, no less. So it's like, and reading this as a Christian, I can say amen to that, because what I think we would see from, as I said, the moment the human beings ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, this not just one fall, but a very long fall, because the more powerful we become, the more we can do. And, it's no use talking about progress. Progress is no good if you're going in the wrong direction. The more you progress, the further you go in the wrong direction. Yeah. Now, we should also recognize the kingdom of God is at hand, right? And when Jesus said that, he meant the kingdom of God is present in the world and at work. So there are a lot of amazing things in our society that are the result of the seed of the kingdom seeding ideas. So the very idea that I think a lot of people revert to when they talk about dehumanization, and this is a point that Tom Holland makes in his book Dominion and elsewhere. Tom Holland is a British historian. He says pretty much all of that kind of thinking and that very reaction comes out of a Christian garden bed. It's a response. It's essentially a Christian response. A lot of the language, the idea of being dehumanized, and this is why the techno optimists say no, we need to let all that go. We need to move beyond all of that. And just recognize that we're evolving, and this is transhumanism. And to define that for listeners, transhumanism is a way of describing our ability to genetically and technologically upgrade ourselves and to fundamentally change our humanity. They're all for that. This is just evolution.
Well, that's some people saying it's just evolution.
Yeah,
it's just yes, exactly what it is.
And you can understand why they would, without a biblical worldview. You can totally understand why they would assume that, even if it's a bit scary to them. I think you could totally understand that. I want to come back to a couple of things, and then you guys can pick it up again. One of the things I think right from the Garden of Eden and then all the way through, if you think about the common denominator, even as you said, Connell, the crops thing is to make it easier for ourselves. It's about providing for ourselves, not trusting in God to be our provider. And then everyone tries to sell the advancements in technologies. It's going to give us more leisure time. But actually, because we're greedy by nature, we actually just want to use it to make more.
Yeah,
we want more. Yeah, we want more. We want more. We want more. And so the more we want, the less we have time to actually just be walking through the garden with the Lord, in a sense.
That's right.
We're too busy because we're making more.
But it's like a kind of it's an amplifier. I see and this is why I don't like to get hung up on the specific technologies.
Yeah.
Or it's social media, or you can't put your finger on the technologies itself. It's the combined effect of it. It amplifies our capability to dehumanize, or to disconnect.
Yeah.
So that might have been cultivating crops and farming and so on, or farming methods. So
nothing there against farmers, by the way.
Nothing against that. But the capacity for that, I mean, that had a profound impact on how we, function as a society. But it's almost like nothing in comparison to the impact that technology has to disconnect us as a community. If you look at technology, it keeps us permanently distracted. I mean, you try having a conversation with people that've got one eye on their phone.
Totally.
You get together, almost everybody in the room is just sitting there looking at the phone. We're permanently distracted and disconnected from what's happening around us. And that's just a subtle, nothing intentional, but we're just drawn into it. You try not looking at your phone for more than 5 minutes and you'll start to feel this prompting within you to go, I better just check to see if I've got a message or is a new thing that's popped up somewhere that I need to read.
And before you move on, the flip side of that is people on the other end expect you to reply straight away.
Yes.
There's the expectations, everyone, in terms of how we engage with each other. It's like, I sent you a message 3 seconds ago. How come you haven't replied?
And a lot of our communication is mediated through these mediums. So and that's kind of problematic as well. I'm keen, Connell, for you to get on once you've made this point and talk about this next big thing, because you've been researching some new technology that's just come out.
Researching is a loose.
He's been watching the news.
Just watching. And these are some of the points that sort of came out from this.
Great.
I'll get to that. I think in terms of technology, how it's changing, we're permanently distracted. It's reducing our cognitive capabilities.
Yeah, totally.
And this comes back to even with the underlying problem with changing our farming methods to make everything easier.
Yeah.
Take the electronic calculator, for example. Before there was a calculator, you had to be able to do mental arithmetic, and then the calculator comes along. And now I could just use the calculator.
Yeah. So We don't even try.
I lose the ability to do mental arithmetic. I'm losing my ability to handwrite because I just can type so much quicker and everything. And sometimes I've got to write something on a piece of paper and I'm looking at my handwriting and it's appalling now. And it's actually hard. My fingers don't really even want to move that. So we're reducing our cognitive capability. So the easier that we can acquire information and the quicker we can connect to people and the quicker we can get answers back, it changes us from a behavior perspective.
Yeah,
we actually lose to control some of those thinking muscles and so on that are necessary and really important. So we sort of become weak in areas. So as a society, it's changing us, and we become less satisfied with our natural lives, and we become addicted to the hyped up, supercharged life that technology gives us.
Yeah.
And that in itself becomes addicted. And then because of that addiction, we actually become more attached to technology. So we actually can't disconnect even if we wanted to, because now that everybody's on it, if you want to disconnect from that, you essentially have to disconnect from the world.
So, and this is because it's quick and easy. It's like the quick and easy fix of things that we want deep down, connection and a feeling of being connected and but because we get in these short, sharp sort of doses, we naturally find it.
It's that late, and it's that laziness. You don't have to go out looking for stuff anymore. It's just immediately available to us, whatever we want. So we shop online. We have it delivered to our door. We get our food delivered.
I haven't done that yet. I still go to the shops. Am I old? I must be old-fashioned, Connell.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still go to the shop.
Sometimes, a lot of the time, I can't be bothered. Just do it online. It's just not worth the hassle. And entertainment. Just sit down, press a button, and they're immediately entertained with whatever I want to consume. So everything's
increasingly more sensational.
Yeah,
which in my view, as is pointed out, a lot of these things are happening faster than we adapt.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we take as real emotionally, our emotional response. You might watch a TV series, and that is affecting your sense, your lens on reality. And even when you know it's fiction, but it profoundly affects the way that you see life, your values.
Like a drug, almost.
Well,
because it changes.
There is the drug element because there's the entertainment fix, right? Because we need our entertainment fix because we are, and I've said this in a previous episode, I think we are entertainment addicted, stimulation addicted. It's very difficult for us not to have stimulation. This is, it's like, and the shorter, this is where things like TikTok and the reels and it's just those little hits of sort of entertainment. So there's all of that happening, certainly. But as I've said before, I think it is fundamentally disorienting our desires and the lens really through which we access lives and our expectation of life. And I mean, I've referred to it as narrative dysphoria, because even as a Christian, like I know that, yes, I'm in the biblical story, right? I'm in the story of reality that the Bible sets out. But I have found that a certain level of exposure to entertainment media really knocks that. It knocks my alignment with that reality, and I start to find my lens getting very distorted, and I believe it's a kind of dysphoric experience.
Yeah. So instead of having to go to the cinema, for example, to watch a new movie, that took a little bit more effort. You had to actually plan around it. It cost you money, so to get that kind of hit. And then what happens is that now comes to us in the form of, well, we can just access it instantly from anything we want to watch at any time. We can watch it straight away. And then it becomes, in those little clips, the little YouTube clips and things like that, it means that we can consume that feeling quicker and more accessible than we've ever. So everything gets easier and gets closer to us, so that it takes less effort on our part to engage in any of those things. And it's the speeding up that's the underlying problem. It's making it more accessible, more immediately accessible. So then we engage, like I am addicted to YouTube clips. I just feel completely driven to consume, these 5-minute thing, and I'll sit there on it and I'll click my way through quickly and I'm off and on to the next one. Constantly consuming. And I know that I am completely, I can feel that drive in myself of trying to find something else that's of interest to me. And then sometimes there's nothing on there that I want to look at, or I've watched it all and there's a disappointment, and then I'll come back an hour later and see if it's been refreshed. I recognize it inside myself. But if I had to actually go to the library to get information, it's putting a big distance between my ability to consume it and actually, it just makes it so accessible. And this is the point I was going to make before, is that it's the speeding up and it's the sense that I'm attached to things and I can't physically get away from it, even if I wanted to.
Matt, I reckon what we might do is in the next episode, we might talk about the future technologies and what's coming, because I feel like there's still a bit to talk about here, where we're up to now. And I think, we'll come to that. We might just have a 2-part episode here, because I want to, come back to the fact that we're thinking about screens and stuff like that. But if we come back to the point of social isolation and stuff, if you even think about, if you do go to the shops, there's not a checkout person to talk to anymore. It's not just in the technology. It's even when we do try to make an effort. You go to the movies, you buy your ticket without speaking to anyone. So even in those settings where there are opportunities, we're even further trying to simplify and make it easier, as you say, but it's actually costing us something. Now, that's all really great and convenient, but I look at my kids, and hopefully they don't listen to this podcast, but their ability to have a conversation like we would have conversations, it's much more difficult for them because they're so used to, I'll reply when I want to on my screen or when I've thought about what I want to say. I don't need to engage. Now, my kids are a little bit older, so they're probably in a generation that was sort of halfway between the two. But I hear commonly from parents of younger children today is they actually don't know how to engage with other people. They don't know how because they don't do it in the supermarket. They don't. They really don't do it anywhere. And in fact, if I said something nice to the McDonald's drive-through lady, it's like, oh, Dad, why do you have to always talk to people? No, and they're serious about it. They're deadly serious about it. It's like it's embarrassing that I talk to people.
So this is the same environment where, and you can see how this would happen, where people would find themselves asking the question, why would I get up, get in the car, go to church and sit in an auditorium with a whole bunch of people and, sing songs and listen to a guy speaking when I can jump onto YouTube? This is the consumer mentality that this can feed. I can jump onto YouTube and listen to some of the best presenters in the world, do it probably in less time and 100 times better. You have people asking that question, why would you do that? When this is exactly why you should do that, right? Because it's not about how good the sermon is or how good the music is, or it's that very act of getting in the car, turning up, being in a space with lots of different people and being part of a movement that consists of a number of people demonstrating for the same thing. And I often refer to our church services like a public demonstration. I think there's something intangibly important about people gathering and singing together in one accord. Now, I realize in our world, it's very difficult for us to see, sort of quantify the benefit of that. But being together in a room with a whole lot of people singing songs, we should never let go of that. In a society where, now you listen to people that are good singers and no, it's healthy for us to sing together into one accord, quite apart from the fact that we're singing praise and worship to God and we're aligning our hearts. The sense of sort of communal synergy or what I would refer to as confluence. Confluence is, one river joining with another, right? And flowing, together. This sense of not only confluence with God, but with each other, this sense that we all flow together. It's this sense of connectedness. And we connect based on who we are in God, our fundamental identity. This is the church spaces where we revisit what is fundamental about our humanity. There is nothing more human than connecting together as a human family to acknowledge God the Father as his children. That is like the basic moment of revisiting our humanity, quite apart from anything else that happens in that space. The very environment that would have people asking, why would I bother, or that would work against people even wanting to gather, is the very environment, I think, that accentuates the necessity of that very thing.
Totally. Yeah. It's interesting in the research, there's a lady called Baha. I don't know anything more about her. She's a licensed psychotherapist, and there's been a number of conferences looking at how we make the best out of AI rather than just focusing on the negative stuff. And interesting, she's secular as far as I can tell. So her advice is for folks is to engage the 5 senses as much as possible. Get out into the natural environment. Remove tech from your life for 10 minutes, then an hour, then a day, then maybe 2 days. Keep growing that, the amount of time that you reduce tech. Reduce technology at all levels and include alternatives. Connect with real people. Stop going to church online. It was one of the things she said. Get with real people. She said, start to treat tech as an external part of you that you have control over, rather than as something that controls you.
Which is all good, but society we're creating won't let you do that.
But that's where I think what Matt's saying is the church, we need to model something different.
And that's where this polarization or clear change is going to happen, I think, of where we have to be conscious and it's going to cost us something. There's 2 worlds we can live in. And it's not an all or nothing. It's not, do we disengage from all technology?
Yeah.
That's not what we're saying. But there is actually a deliberate choice you've got to make to engage in one world over another. We've actually got to become conscious of the underlying problem, which is, I think, what we're trying to do here. And we're talking about become really and take, because I think we're kind of asleep at the wheel a little bit. And after we did our podcast last time, I had some conversations with people a few days after, just talking about what we were talking about. And people are they're fixated on one technology versus another, but it's trying to show people where this can lead us as a society. Everybody I talked to about it was kind of really quite disturbed, but because they could actually see how easily and how much we're already well down the road into this. But it was like a light being turned on. And it's like, well, we've got to turn the light onto this. That allows us actually to use technology in a more healthy way. But then I think we've got to make a deliberate choice to not allow ourselves to be consumed by it in the way that the world wants us to be consumed, because it's creating that dependence where you can't get off. And once you're on it, it has that control over you. The more that you are connected, the harder and more costly it is to get off. And so I think this is where I think from a Christian perspective, and I haven't seen much from the Christian commentary side of things that sort of says what we should be doing about it. And it's made me think about it too, like from ourselves as a church. We meet on a Sunday, and a lot of people, that's what our view of community is. It's gathering on a Sunday. But it's like we need to be thinking about much more purposefully, I think, what does it mean to actually start to restore this idea of community and connectedness that was actually what God planned for us in the first place.
Can I, and then I'll get you to close, because I just want to, as I've been studying the last couple of days, and I've been doing the research as well, I've been asking myself the question, so what do I do? Because I think sometimes we think, this is a problem, someone else needs to kind of tell me what to do. And I moved away from, instead of what I'm not going to do, instead of the don't do this, it's actually do more of this.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And so instead of don't be on your phone so much, because then it's like, okay, well, what should I do now? It's actually find other things and so it's like, I'm actually going to set aside a certain number of hours in a week that I want to meet with someone face to face. I'm actually going to make the time to go, hey, let's grab a coffee, or let's go for a walk, or, it's a simple thing. But rather than trying to stop doing things, I want to start doing more of other things.
Yeah. And I would add to that, and I think this is the opportunity here, because times of polarization, as you describe it, have often been great times for the kingdom, because, as I keep saying, the light shines brightest in the darkest, in the darkness. And I think this is where the church has something really unique, because this connectedness, because we're in a world where people are presenting themselves in a certain way, and what it causes is this real loneliness behind that then, because I don't have a sense that I am known and accepted by someone when I know things about myself that are unacceptable, right? Now, what the church creates, and well, let me say what the church should create, and I think this is something that I feel very much been feeling that is important lately, is an environment where people are connecting not just on the surface level, but to do what James in his epistle tells us to do: confess your sins to one another, to have the kind of relationships that allow us, in other words, to be vulnerable and to share our failures and to share our struggles. This is something, and I was reading something talking about AI doing therapy, with an AI. No, but what you don't get from that is a relationship where someone hears the worst about you, but loves you and affirms you. That sense of grace. I don't see you in terms of your behavior, because we can often do that with ourselves. Because remember, we are created to reflect the image of God to each other. Our role is to reflect who we are to each other. And as Christians, we take that another level, right? Because we are a community where I describe the church like a hospital, right? We're all these, broken, sinful people. And yet what we do in our journey of recovery is that we confess our sins to one another. We are vulnerable with each other, and yet we love and accept in Jesus' name.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Thrive Perspectives. Our hope is that these discussions will challenge you to look at life from a new perspective. You'll find all our resources at the Thrive Today website, thrivetoday.tv. If there's a topic that you'd like us to discuss, please email us. Our email is contact@thrivetoday.tv. Until next time, our prayer is that you will thrive.